Spike in gang crime and gun violence has sparked a call to introduce strict anti-bikie laws, similar to those in Australia. This call coming from Mark Mitchell at the National Party this morning. Joining us this morning, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Prime Minister, morena, good morning.
Morena.
So Mark Mitchell reckons if you've got three gang members congregating together, then you could throw them in jail like they do in some states of Australia. Good idea?
Well, look, I think when we look at what we're experiencing right now, it only takes two gang members to have an issue with a public shooting. So let's actually do what works. We are absolutely concerned around the escalation we've seen and the recent tensions. You already see, Ryan, that, for instance, up until the end of May, there were 10 arrests, 10 warrantless, and this is in 1 week just related to these tensions. 10 warrants executed, firearms seized, 250 rounds of ammunition. So the focus at the moment for the police is absolutely on enforcement around the areas where they're seeing those particular tensions and that escalation right now. When it comes to other laws, we've been looking for some time at whether or not there are other things that we should be doing within our legislation to support the police. Here we take very strongly the guidance from police, what would make a difference for them, and that's what we're considering. At the moment, though, firearm prevention orders, gun registers, those are all the things that we're working on as we speak that we know will make a difference.
OK. One of the things Andrew Costa said to us last week would make a difference, and that they were in the process of recommending to you, was being able to seize assets as soon as you find a gang member with a gun. You open to that?
Yeah, so we have, as he would have outlined, they are in the process of putting some proposals to us, and we've said to them, look, bring them as quickly as you can. We want to hear from you, as those who are operating on the front line, what is going to make a difference. But I'm not interested in tokenistic measures. I'm not interested in things that are just there for the politics of it. Let's do something that will make a difference.
Okay.
What we're seeing right now is unacceptable. It is, behaviour that is causing people huge amounts of intimidation, fear.
Oh, they're scared.
There's always the issue of people getting caught in the crossfire.
Yeah.
And so, again, this is why we want to do what works.
OK, what's tokenistic?
Immediately, though, because we know law changes take time.
Yeah. What's tokenistic? You said...
Yeah, well, just generally, I'm not saying anything specific at the moment.
Okay.
My point is, Ryan, that when we get the advice, it's about what's meaningful.
Sure, because Costa sounded very keen on our program last week, the idea of being able to go after assets if you find a gang member with a gun. You're saying you are very open to changing the law to make that a reality.
As I've said, we've been open with the police to say, if you've identified things that will make a difference, bring those proposals to us so that we can work them through. There's a couple that we've already been working on, but keep in mind, already we have the progress on the firearm prevention orders and the gun registers, which the National Party have not been in support of the work we've been doing on registering firearms.
Yeah, but let's not play politics now,
and I wouldn't mind seeing them actually focus on what's here in the here and now.
I know, but we're not playing politics, remember?
Even the police is... Oh, no.
Come on.
The point I'm making here is that... No, Ryan, the point I'm making is that when there's something meaningful that even the Police Association have said would make a difference, it would be great to have cross-party support for it.
OK. You mentioned there were two other things you were currently working on. What are they?
Firearm prevention orders in the gun registers as well at the moment.
Right, OK.
And as I say, when it comes to, we are looking in some other areas. Assets is one of them. But again, we've already had considerable increases in the proceeds of crime and what's been seized. But we're constantly looking at whether or not we never want to see those in organised crime moving assets around. And so working on ways that we can make sure that we are covering that off as well. It's quite a complex area, though.
OK, interesting.
To cover off.
Prime Minister Sonny Cashel, Dairy and Business Owners Association, he says 30% of...
I know Sonny.
Sonny, I'm sure, says hello to you too, though he's not happy, to be honest. He says 30% of business owners who are contacting him at the moment are contacting him to ask how they can get a gun licence. What's your advice to them?
I would say that, well, look, I can't make any assessment on those numbers. What I can do, obviously, though, is totally understand the concern that exists because we have had a spike in the Auckland area around ram raids. But what we can do is make sure that we are supporting those who might be at risk of that or have experienced that with preventative measures to try and reduce down that happening again. So you will have already heard we're using the proceeds of crime to support those small businesses in the same way we did with fog cannons, and that made a big difference when they were getting held up for cigarettes in many cases.
But you can understand...
So it's not often...
You can understand why they want to have a gun.
Firearms are not the answer. Firearms are not the answer, and they will never be the answer. We don't want to see people put themselves at risk, which is why we have been working on and will be releasing, of course, the details. We're working with Retail NZ on that funding to support bollards, security doors for those who may have been targeted.
I guess, but as you say, I mean, if you have been... You know, there's one guy in Pukekohe in a dairy who's had a knife to his throat, and 2 weeks prior it was a machete. You can understand why these people want guns.
Ryan, I'm never ever going to say that there is a situation where the right response is for someone to arm themselves, because we can see what happens in those situations. So the right response is making sure that we put in preventative measures to support those who have experienced repeat crime. We have now the retail unit that exists within police alongside the firearms team, and we've been able to do that because we've increased police numbers. So they've instigated a retail unit to try and start looking specifically at the experience of retailers and making sure they're providing greater support, and with the funding we've put in, the ability to help fund some of the measures that will keep those repeat areas safe.
Prime Minister, is Nanaia Mahuta got too much on her plate?
No, not at all.
How is it then?
In relation to
China. This is China and the Pacific. I mean, Penny Wong, she's been there 5 minutes and she's been to 3 Pacific Island countries. 2 of them, all 3 within 11 days.
So here's 2 things. When you're a new government, you get out quickly to go and see people. We're obviously not a new government. We already have those relationships. We're not in a standing start. And even then, Ryan, in the last 18 months, we have had 100 ministerial or formal engagements with our Pacific Island counterparts. That's me, that's the Minister engaging with the Pacific. The third point I'd make, the top 3 countries for overseas aid and development spend in the Pacific is New Zealand, Australia and Japan. And we've just increased our investment into the region by 45% over the next 3 years.
So the money's doing the talking.
On the number one issue that the Pacific has raised with us.
The money's doing the talking, Prime Minister, rather than
if I could finish
the face-to-face contact.
I feel quite strongly about this, Ryan. Some of the commentary I've seen does not appreciate or at least give any acknowledgement that the Pacific are sovereign nations who will make their own decisions around engagement. But the idea that New Zealand has not been present when we've worked closely with almost every Pacific nation on climate change, on COVID-19, on vaccine support, we are of the Pacific. They are more than just our friends or our
Prime
family.
Minister, I agree with this.
And the idea that whether or not you're visited during border controls is a measure of your relationship is just wrong.
You've conceded yourself, Prime Minister, that the Chinese are obviously ramping up efforts in there. I mean, how is it that China's foreign minister, a superpower like China, has managed to visit the Solomons, Kiribati, Samoa, Fiji, Tonga, Vanuatu, PNG, East Timor,
Ryan,
all in the space of time that our foreign minister has been to Fiji once?
Ryan, first of all, again, 100 ministerial engagements in 18 months. Also, Ryan, there have been border controls that have not allowed us to visit. Keeping in mind, Tonga has visited us. We've visited Fiji. The Minister is currently in the process of organising her first visits into countries who have only recently opened their borders. We have not sought exemptions to go into countries that have had closed border arrangements out of respect of COVID-19 measures that they've had. Now, if other countries choose to do that, that's for them. But the idea that simply whether or not you step foot into an airport is a measure of a relationship is wrong. Our relationships are strong, but why don't we...
It's the face-to-face engagement that culturally is quite important to the Pacific.
Ryan, again, this is where I'm frustrated, though. The idea that simply New Zealand is the one dictating the relationships the Pacific has is wrong. These are sovereign nations. They determine their engagement with other countries. Now, the idea that China is engaging simply because New Zealand hasn't visited because of COVID is also wrong. It's much more complex than that.
Fair enough. Hey, just before we go, Prime Minister, because I haven't spoken to you since you were in the US, any secrets to share from your time in the White House? What did you guys talk about in the Rose Garden?
Or if they were secrets, I wouldn't be sharing them. But reflections, you know, I think one of the things that's often quite hard to convey is just the nature, the person, getting to know someone. And something that really stood out for me was, you know, we had that longer period of time together. I think it's because we were actually just enjoying the conversation. But President Biden took the time to walk us back through the Rose Garden and to come out to the waiting area where other New Zealand officials had been waiting during the meeting, and he took the time to meet everyone. Now, that to me is a measure of the man, the fact that he wanted to come and acknowledge everyone, because it was a really big deal for the team to be there in the White House, and that for me speaks volumes about a person.
Yeah, where does that rank in terms of highlights for you? Must be up there.
Oh, look, it's no question that it's a special thing to be able to visit the White House. I can tell you that it's much smaller than you expect. It's a very intimate environment, and someone had shared that with me before I went in there, that it's actually much, much more intimate than you expect, because, of course, all of the depictions of it make it feel like it's quite large, but it's been apparently designed that way. It's also very odd to come through doors that are to blend into the background. It has a very odd feeling to the room.
Prime Minister, thank you very much.